Welcome to Assembly Calendar. I'm Mike Friesen. With us for our program today, Assemblyman Robert Castelli. Assemblyman Castelli represents the 89th Assembly District in New York State. That includes parts of Westchester County. And we want to thank you folks all throughout the region for joining us for our program today. And Assemblyman Castelli, nice to see you and happy 2011.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
It is our first chance to get together since the beginning of this new year, a new calendar year, a new legislative year. The 2011 legislative session just getting underway here at the state capitol in Albany.
Exciting things happening.
Our job is to let the folks know about those exciting things that are happening and what goes on here at the state capitol that impacts on you folks that are watching this program. And I sometimes think there's been a disconnect, Assemblyman, with people understanding that the debates, the discussions, the legislation that gets enacted here in Albany, it really does have quite a huge impact on the people of this New York State, not just here in the Capital District region, but in Westchester and all parts of the state.
Absolutely. You know, it's funny, before I'd gotten up here, I had always believed that it was the federal level of legislation that impacted us the most. Now I realize absolutely that is what we do here in Albany that has the greatest impact across the broadest spectrum of people's lives. So it's a much more important and a much more complicated process than people would know. Albeit, I should also say, it's a much more collegial atmosphere. People are not aware of that. You know, they see the goings on in elections, and that's always sad, you know, especially if you have heated, contentious races. But the fact is we all get along very well with each other. And that is to the credit of all of us, because obviously nothing gets done if you can't do it in a bipartisan fashion.
And I should note here that you just won a re-election to the Assembly, coming off a special election that was held about a year or so ago.
Correct, 10 months before the second one.
So you've been busy. You've been getting a chance to know the people in your district pretty well, and that's not a bad thing, because that means a lot of interaction, a lot of communication. You probably know better than anybody what's on the mind of the people in the 89th district right now.
Absolutely, and I think, you know, you hit on something, Mike. The fact is there is a tremendous disconnect between what we're doing here and getting it down to the people there, because people down in the district are not always aware of what's going on here, and I believe it's our job to make sure that they are aware of that. So, you know, I try to get around the district as much as possible, send out press releases every week just to let people know what I'm up to, so, you know, they realize that the guy who has the honor of serving them is actually trying to serve them.
Well, and that's a huge purpose of this very show that we're doing right here, to give you an opportunity to let the folks in the 89th District across Westchester County know what you're up to and how you feel about the different proposals and things that are being talked about here in Albany. So let's get right to it.
Great.
This session started off, of course, as most legislative sessions do, with an address by the governor. We've got a new governor this year, just like we got a lot of new faces in the state legislature. So let's get a little btake a feel for that first address, that State of the State message. That
and he's one of my constituents, I should add.
It's a small world after all. Let's take a look and listen to some of what Andrew Cuomo said, and then we'll be back to talk more today with Robert Castelli.
Another new year at the state capitol, bringing with it plenty of new faces.
For the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of New York.
And legislative leaders looking for cooperation in a diverse House.
Whether it's Manhattan or Montauk or Binghamton or Buffalo, if we're helping each other, that's the message that our constituents are looking for across this state. I think we have an opportunity to take our state to a level that's never been before.
New Governor Andrew Cuomo gave his first annual State of the State message.
What is the state of the state? This is a time of crisis for our state, a time when we must transform our government to once again become the progressive capital of the nation.
The new governor utilized a number of visuals to graphically display what's wrong with state government.
Well, listen, it was a very inspired speech, I have to say. The governor is one of my constituents, so you know, I'm proud to hear that he's laid out a plan which is very similar to one of the ones that I campaigned on. So we are hoping that we can do this.
The governor now prepares his first ever budget proposal.
That first ever budget proposal is just minutes away from being handed down to Bob Castelli and the rest of the state legislature. What is your early read on your constituent, Governor Andrew Cuomo? A lot of people here in Albany remember his father as governor as being you know, pretty much to the left traditional liberal governor of this state, but his son sounds anything but right now.
Well, he's laid out a framework, much to his credit, that requires us to get our fiscal house in order. And I applauded him from day one for doing that, and I still applaud him from doing that. The real dilemma will be, can we do this in the type of divided house that we have sometimes? You know, you have a multiplicity of factions at work there. Frequently, you know, one of the things that I was really amused at when I first got up here was, you know, people think that it's the Republicans versus the Democrats. Well, it's actually New York City versus upstate. And that is a much more powerful differentiation. And because of that, the issues that plague New York City are only indigenous to the city. And those from the upstate areas are not ones that generally concern, you know, are representatives from the city. So each group of individuals in the assembly are going to represent their constituency and their interests. And that's kind of where we butt heads from time to time. But, you know, it's a good thing. It's democracy.
And some people might say it's even about taxpayers of the state of New York versus the special interests. I think of one of the PowerPoint slides that the governor used during his State of the State message, where he was the captain of a ship and the special interests were coming in and dropping bombs on he and the legislative leaders. I mean, it was amusing, but it was kind of a pretty striking image, and I think got a lot of people thinking about, you know, who are we representing, who are we trying to defend here, the special interests
Sure.
or the taxpayers?
Well, I mean, you have a lot of special interest groups and a lot of lobbyists up here, and they're all trying to broker influence with all of us. I mean, that's what they do. That's their job. I don't hold that against anybody. But at the end of the day, I and all of us work for the 130,000 people that sent us up here. And I don't answer to you, to our leadership. I answer to those 130,000 people. And as long as I don't break faith with them, I've been led to believe that they will have faith in me. And that's how I've started my job over the past year, and that's why I continue it, and will continue it for as long as I'm here. So, I think it's very simple. The real dilemma is the devil is in the detail. You know, the governor laid out very sweeping plans. He identified the problem. He identified what he wanted to do to fix them. And the moment we walked out of that room, people were slam dunking this poor man and saying, oh, well, he didn't say this, he didn't say that. Well, you know, the budget, and we're going to see it later on this afternoon, last year's was 3.5 feet high off the floor. So you can't, in 1 hour, do anything other than gloss over the generalities. These are the problems. These are the strategies to fix it. He did that. I think we need to give him a pass and see whether or not he's going to talk the talk and walk the walk. I, for one, have enough faith in him to say, I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt. And if he does that, I will be behind him 100%, party notwithstanding, because that doesn't matter.
Right, you people watching this program actually have a bit of an advantage on Bob Castelli and myself right now, because we haven't seen those budget details yet. But by the time this program airs, you will have had a chance to have seen them, and you might have even a little bit of a better idea what the governor's proposing in this budget. There's a lot of curiosity, a lot of wonderment in these hours leading up to that budget presentation. But we know a few things. We know that he's already appointed commissions looking into the Medicaid program and how it is those services are provided in New York State, as well as how they're funded. He's appointed a commission looking into education, and again, the delivery of services, how it's funded. There's talk of property tax caps. There's all sorts of ideas that are out there on the table. Again, this governor doesn't seem to be shy about thinking about shaking things up a little bit and maybe doing things a little bit differently.
Great. I'm all for that. Let's just take it from the top with some of the things you mentioned. Medicaid is the single largest portion of our $135 billion budget. Okay? Last year, it was more than $51 billion worth. And it is such a system in chaos that we actually built $100 million in anticipated Medicaid fraud recovery. Now, I would challenge you that if you can build in with certainty $100 million in fraud recovery, you have a house that's in disarray and somebody needs to clean house. So the idea that he's willing to take this one on, I applaud him for, because if he cleans that up, I mean, think about it. He might be able to save realistically $1 billion. $1 billion is a lot of money. It'll fund a lot of the programs that might otherwise be cut. So right now, I think this is what we're looking at. And again, we're going to see this budget in a couple of hours. But the reality is, if he cuts, I would hope that he cuts with a scalpel, not with an axe. that you recognize those cuts. Certainly the neediest people in society, you know, are going to be the ones given the greatest attention. Things like education, important things to us. You know, quality education requires you to pay for it, but it doesn't require you to overpay for it. He's going to look at pension reform. Pension reform is going to be a big issue with him. And I might add, pension reform is going to be a big fight. Many of the big unions in New York City are bracing for a fight. You know, and I understand this. You know, they fought hard to get benefits for their members. Nobody wants to give them up. And quite honestly, I must tell you, if you shook hands, you signed on a bottom line, and you negotiated in good faith, you shouldn't have to go back 5 years and 10 years and open up a contract and violate or breach that contract. But moving forward, I think what we're going to see is some very, very strong issues. We're looking at a Tier 6 system, for instance. So those will be things that he's going to look at, and that could be a big fight. You know, so and obviously with our speaker, Sheldon Silver, you know, he's kind of carved out a niche in that area. So you're going to see he representing those city interests versus our governor representing the state.
I hear what you're saying about the unions not wanting to give back ground that they've been able to gain over the years, but then again, you know, you can't get blood from a stone. You have to say, well, but we have to rethink where we're moving down the road as we move forward, because if the system collapses and the state isn't able to support itself, you know, what are you going to have then?
Of course. But, you know, at the end of the day, if you spend smarter and not harder, you end up finding some of this money that heretofore has been wasted. So I think there's a multiplicity of strategies. You have public-private partnerships, you have outsourcing of government services, you have the consolidation of government services, and these are all things, and I'm thrilled about this, that the governor is looking at. And my colleagues, I might add, on my side of the aisle are also thrilled by this. So, you know, because these have been things that we've been saying, you know, for certainly the last year that I've been here. Everyone, I believe, has approached this with an open mind. I had breakfast this morning with some of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, and we were discussing potentially what we were going to see in this budget. And I think we've all approached this with an open mind. And I think there is a certain level of consistency and a desire to work with each other for the greater good of the state. Can we do it? Will there be issues that are contentious? Absolutely. It is why we have democracy, why we have a two-party system. But as long as everybody goes in there with a pure heart, I think we'll come out with a better system.
It's almost as if it's a reboot of the franchise, to use some Hollywood lingo, because you've got a governor who seems to be willing to be a strong leader at a time when, you know, he's the fourth governor the state has seen in 4 years, and the last couple have had some issues and had some problems and maybe haven't been the strong leaders looking to solve the problems and move the state forward. And with that kind of leadership, you know, maybe this legislature and this governor you folks can accomplish some things and really change the way things have been done here for a long time.
I would certainly hope so. That is my wish, and it's my desire to work with the governor and anyone across the aisle to make that a reality.
It's going to be an interesting 2011 legislative session. That's for darn sure, Bob Castelli. It's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. All those discussions that you're talking about, they're going to be good, healthy discussions. It's great to have that kind of democratic debate, and you know, it'll be interesting to see in a few months exactly how this budget comes together and what the future of the state of New York is going to be.
Absolutely.
All right. If you folks watching want to reach out to your state representative, easy thing for you to do. There's the information on how to get a hold of Robert Castelli. 4 New King Street in White Plains is where the office is. You can dial 686-7335 anytime you want. He's got great staff there. Talk to Lindsay on the phone. She'll take good care of you. And an email address right there on the bottom of the screen, castelli.assembly.state.ny.us. Bob Castelli, thanks for this update. We look forward to meeting with you in coming weeks to find out just how this budget debate is going here at the state capitol this year.
Thank you, sir. It's an honor to be here.
Thank you for joining us, and we want to thank you folks too as well. We'll hope to see you soon for that next edition of Assembly Calendar.